but it's likely that we'll finish before that, and that's great because then you have the rest of your day. So we want to say welcome to you. Thank you for joining us for this discussion on developing effective transition strategies. And I'm here with my colleagues, and I'm going to turn it over to them so they can say hi.
Hi, this is Galen. Welcome, everyone.
And hello, this is Chris. I'm here too. Welcome.
And Prentice Davis, also here. So I think we'll have some good information lined up for you, and we're really looking forward to that, sharing that with you. So, of course, there's Galen's shiny face, and Chris's smiling face, and, of course, you know, just a picture of me. So let's talk about outcomes for a second. Some of the outcomes that we have for this call are to explore effective transition term strategies, to develop awareness of GatewayLive tools, which we'll share a couple. Well, yeah, we'll share a couple with you during this call, and one from the database. We definitely want this call to be informative for you and useful for you, so we definitely want to set aside some time to have your questions answered. And then one of the outcomes that obviously won't happen on the call itself are to develop a student transition plan. And we'll say a little bit more about that toward the end of the call. So let's meet your colleagues. We are joined by 3 esteemed directors today who the goal will be for them to share their expertise and experiences so that that information can inform how you approach transition with your students this fall. So first up, we have Dr. Sounya Walker. She's the director at Mott College, opened in 2012, and served approximately over 115 students.
Hello.
And next up, we have Erik Bauman, the director of Bristol Community College, also opened in 2012 and has served approximately over 100 students. And then last but not least, nice halo or St. Louis Arch. Dr. Jennifer Alt, my apologies, who is the director at Spokane Falls Community College, and they have served approximately over 180 students. So those are our colleagues, our guest directors who will be joining us and sharing their expertise with us this afternoon. So we're going to go ahead and lead off with Dr. Sounya Walker. You want to say hi, Sounya?
Hello, everyone.
All right. So first question, Sounya, that I have for you has to do with lessons learned and any sort of processes and tools that you've incorporated as a result. And the first question is how is your approach to transition different now than your first semester?
Given our first semester and being a new program, we weren't as firm in terms of transition students or even knowing what to expect with transition students. Haven't had any at that time, but our second semester we began to attack issues early and dealing with problems beforehand instead of allowing it to wait or linger 2 or 3 days or a few days later. We did require transition students to attend academic seminar the second semester to see how that went, and it went well. Students did say they enjoy being able to attend the seminar or academic lab, as we called it before, because it allowed them an opportunity to do homework and get help that they need in those classes. Another thing we did differently in the second semester is we signed up every transition student and connected them with a tutor in our learning center, regardless if they were struggling or not, because we found that probably during that 4th week of school, students began to struggle a little bit and needed more assistance than what they thought they did.
Can I interject a question here?
Uh-huh.
So you mentioned that you developed this transition academic seminar. What was the intent or the purpose behind the academic seminar? And then you also use academic labs, so those are essentially one and the same in your eyes.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. In the first semester, it was academic lab as a new program from the network. That's what they were using. And then from that academic lab, we designed the academic seminar. And the purpose of the seminar was to work with the school district to offer a high school credit. And so we began to start developing more structured seminar for the students, because we saw that we saw our attendance dropping in terms of students just coming and working on a computer and just doing homework. So we began to develop the seminar more in a structured manner where we can offer opportunities where they can earn high school credit, which it has been approved with the school district, but we're working on still finalizing those the academic seminar objectives.
Okay. Cool.
I think another, go ahead.
Oh, in addition to, I mean, if there's more to share, go for it.
I was just going to say that, too. The resource specialists began to utilize the campus resources more than they did before. They were assisting the students, but we began to connect them to a lot of the resources on campus so that they can become familiar with them a little bit more and utilize them. We had to walk them hand by hand to do that because we trusted that they were doing it. However, we made connections and built some relationships where we were able to track whether or not students were attending the tutoring sessions that they say they were attending. So, and that worked out.
And I'm wondering if you could throw out a couple of examples of the types of campus resources that you thought it would be important for students to be familiar with. And then in addition, I'm wondering if you could share your take on the importance of, because I noticed you called out specifically that you walked students by hand to some of these resources, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the importance of sort of being hands-on with that approach too. So the first part has to do with identifying the specific resources that you're connecting students to, and then the other piece has to do with hearing your philosophy about the importance of being hands-on with regard to connecting students to those resources.
Okay. Well, the resources I'm referring to is we have a number of academic labs on campus where students can get assistance with writing. We have a writing center where they can get help with writing papers or any English projects or any type of writing assignments in various classes. And in the writing center, students schedule appointments or they can walk in and we connect with who's leading that session on that day where we track to see whether or not they attended. And I'll talk a little bit about how we track that in a few minutes. We also have what is called a math empowerment lab. That is a lab where students can go and get assistance with math. We also have a learning center, and the learning center is a tutoring center where you can get a tutor for various subjects and classes on campus. And the second resources, we have our Career Resource Center where students can go to look up careers. They can also utilize computers for working on assignments and utilize the facilitators there to help with any type of employment opportunities as well. And any other workshops, they can attend workshops there as well, dealing with study skills down to time management, to stress, and a whole slew of other student workshops we have for free on campus.
And I have to jump in here and say that's a lot of resources. And you know, I know that other folks don't have the advantage of having so many resources, but it's great to hear you and your team taking good advantage of those resources. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and we have in our Learning Center, the second semester we sign up every student with a tutor. And in our Learning Center, students have to sign up with a contract for the semester.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are we following up with students to make sure that they're attending and getting help, the Tutoring Center actually call and follow with students as well, and they hold them to the contract for the entire semester.
Mm. So it's like an
run,
appointment. It's like an
yes.
appointment that you must be at, or you get some sort of flag on your name and you guys find out about it.
Yes, we do, and they give us a report on how many hours students are there and how many of Gateway students attended. And what tended to happen this semester is they were able to do group tutoring with us as well for the number of students that we have attending the session.
Awesome.
So that was a great thing because it holds the students accountable and it lets them know that, you know, tutors are here for you and they're looking for you at the time you say you're going to come. So that's that personal accountability for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And the last, I think, Prentice, you asked something about holding their hands. I found as a second-year director that even though they're in the ages of that 16 to 24 or 18 to 24, you still have to walk them through a process because being on a college campus, they are not familiar with what that process looks like. So we make certain that we walk them through what that process looks like so that way as they become independent learners and thinkers, they'll begin to be able to slowly but surely leave the nest
yeah.
and being able to be independent on their own.
Right. You know, a couple of thoughts that brings up for me is that, you know, their first semester in the program, it's a pretty insular experience. Oftentimes, students don't venture out too far from the main classrooms and the Gateway to College office. And then you turn around and say, hey, I want you to go across campus and make sure you show up for this appointment on time. That's a very different experience than probably what they've grown used to their first semester. So I definitely see the importance with regard to sort of that personalized support and making sure that students are walked to the place that they need to be on campus. You started getting into it a little bit earlier, Sounya, but I'm wondering if you could highlight a few things with regard to the roles and the responsibilities of other team members, and particularly how it lends itself to supporting students who have transitioned.
Well, we have our resource specialists, and we have myself in terms of the staff members who every day work with the students. But we also have other team members that within the department that works with the students as well. We outlined some leadership tasks and responsibility among us all in terms of helping students. And we have one resource specialist that works directly with the foundation students and the transition students. And I also assist with working with transition students and the new foundation students. We have some of our department teams that come in and do some workshops with our Gateway students, whether staff members on campus or any leaders on campus. We try to pull from various departments on campus that we can connect students to. And these are departments which, if once students transition to post-secondary education, they can apply for opportunities with these programs. We have Women in Education is a program on campus that supports young ladies who are going to college to help them overcome any barriers on campus, whether it's need a flat tire or need a gas, or if they need a tooth pulled or any type of health issues, they can help financially support them, and students are having an opportunity to apply for scholarships. Well, they come in and they do workshops with our females. We had just finally had our first Gateway Day for our young ladies, and they did a workshop dealing with verbal communication. So we try to pull those resources in so that students are able to connect with them now while in Gateway, so that way they build relationships with those leaders when they try to apply for these programs.
Mm-hmm. How do you find out about those opportunities?
We find out because we find out all the programs on campus that either work with students low income, or students who are incoming freshmen, or students who kind of work with the similar populations. Mm-hmm. And once we do that, we try to connect to see what type of resources we can leverage within the department, and also on campus with other departments in terms of workshops and other supportive services. So we just
That's a great idea.
Connect with other programs that are serving a similar population. We have student support services as well that deal with. We have a TRIO program in terms of Upward Bound and student support services that work with that population that we build relationships with, so we can work with community service or any ACT prep and things of that nature. So we just divvy up some leadership tasks and connect with these programs and bring them back to our meetings and discuss how we can get involved with them.
And Sounya, I think that is this is Galen, and I think that that's an excellent strategy. And I was going to just mention that idea or highlight what you were just saying about the TRIO program, which serves a similar population as Gateway students, and is an excellent program, I would think, to hand off our students as they are in that transition, taking more and more coursework and pursuing those college credits as well. So it sounds like that's a really great strategy, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing that.
Thank you. And Dr. Alkin mentioned she can talk on the TRIO, as her background is in that area too. Once we connected with the Upward Bound coordinator, it was such a great experience because we were able to do, and we're still looking at so many opportunities we can work with them on and leverage resources and funding in terms of academic support, as well as community involvement with students and ACT prep and things of that nature. So it's been great because our students can begin to become part of clubs and organizations that focus on, that have some correlation with their background and are coming from the same places in terms of being first-generation students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you, Sounya. And a little bit later on in the webinar, I want to come back to each of the three guest directors for your additional advice. This might be some parting advice, something that might come up on the call that we haven't discussed yet. But specifically, is there anything else that you want to share with regard to supporting transition students, or the first question having to do with lessons learned?
I just will say when they get to the transition stage in their second semesters, it's very important not to help them understand and still feel connected with Gateway, because some of our students felt a little isolated in terms of the support and love that we shared in the very first semester. They felt like, okay, they didn't want to leave us. They wanted us still to hold their hand just like we did in the first semester. But we still tried to explain to them, we still love them and that we're here for them. So just finding ways to continue to let them know that they are still a part of the program, and still to do programs with transition students to continue to make them feel part of the Gateway program as well.
So now I have to ask you, how do you do that and what that looks like?
Well, for us, I still require transition students to attend academic seminar every Friday, and they still have to meet some of those same criteria from first foundation term in terms of meeting weekly with their resource specialists and attending conferences. So I really haven't changed much in terms of the requirements for transition students and let loose any criteria, because they still need that tender loving care as well.
Yeah, that structure. No reason to remove the structure just because they're advancing in their coursework. They still,
exactly.
like I said, they still need that TLC.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you much.
You're welcome.
All right. And so next up to the plate, I'd like to introduce the director at the Bristol Community College Gateway to College program, Erik Bauman.
Hi.
You want to say hi, Erik?
Hi, everybody.
Erik, I wonder if you could share a little bit about your approach to transition and how it's different now than in your first semester.
I think like every brand new Gateway director, you think you're going to rescue every single kid that comes through, and they're going to learn everything they need to know in 15 weeks, and they're all going to be successful. Which just
you mean that
hasn't
happened?
No, I thought there was something in the water here in Fall River. Apparently there isn't. But I think the biggest challenge for us, from a programmatic point of view, is that we started small in the spring with only about 20 students in our first cohort, and then we tried to effectively double that for the fall. And so there was a very difficult transition for not only myself but also the rest of the Gateway staff, particularly the resource specialists. The way that we really kind of messed up, I'm not going to lie. We really thought that first 15-week semester was going to be enough in terms of skills and experiences to get those students on track, and it was.
What have you found?
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, what have you found? That was your. That was what you believed to be the case, but it sounds like you found out otherwise.
Yeah, we really tried to take that that experience of seeing students kind of not be as successful as we wanted them, and really address and really look at what we were doing, not only from a job description point of view, but also programmatically. And it's still, it's a learning experience. We're still tweaking here and there. Some of the things we've done is kind of created a hybrid transition semester where students are in a combination of courses, either be it all Gateway students in just a very small learning environment between, say, 10 and 15 students, to a Gateway course with, say, 10 or 15 traditional, quote-unquote, traditional college students in there. And then we have some students in just regular college class where they're the only Gateway student in that class. And it goes on a case-by-case basis and depending on what the graduation requirements are. But we find that hybrid transition semester where there's a varying a variety of different types of courses, be it traditional all Gateway students in a one learning community, or a combination, or just individual, combined with much to what Sounya has, kind of an academic resource hour once a week, and some mandatory academic time on campus. We're seeing a little bit better results in our first semester, but we also are trying to even improve that further and actually looking at things we can implement for next semester. We've been meeting pretty regularly as a staff to try and figure out, what does that approach need to be? Do we need to really step up the academics of it all? Whereas I think in the foundation semester, you're really focusing on the social-emotional adjustment to college campus. Obviously, you still have to think about the academics, but
right.
It's a huge transition for a lot of students, and it really requires a lot on behalf of the resource specialists to really kind of taking that down a notch and really focusing that on the academics and empowering the students more.
Can I interject a little bit? With regard to the hybrid approach that you described, I'm wondering if you could share any sort of tools or processes that help you arrive at that, what are the tools or processes that help you develop that structure and make decisions based off of that? So I'm talking about the hybrid structure that you mentioned a little bit ago.
Right. Well, the hybrid structure came out of not only academic success necessity, but also, fiscal necessity.
Right.
Because if I have 9 or 10 students that need to take a course, it makes more financial sense for me to purchase the course as a grant-funded course.
Yeah.
And I'm still working with my college to try and figure out a way to, give me money back for the kids I enroll that are non-Gateway. But that's a different battle and a different webinar altogether.
Yeah. Hey, but I think what is important, though, I wonder if you could say a little bit, I know what you mean by purchasing a course, but I'm guessing that maybe everyone doesn't know, so maybe delve into that a little bit so that folks can really understand how that approach does allow you some flexibility, but it's also cost savings too.
Sure. What we have on the, and I'm assuming most campuses, community college and college campuses do, is that we have the ability to purchase a course from an academic division. So if I'm offering a Psychology 101 course, I can fill out a particular type of form and request a particular faculty member run it at a specific time. This usually goes through either the academic affairs administrator or division dean. Based on what your tuition rates are, it can be cheaper than if you have 8 or 9 students or 10 or 12 students that are going to be enrolled in that course. And what that really gives us is a chance to really plan our semesters, particularly our foundation semesters and second semesters, according to the schedule that we want. It does take a little bit of politicking, if that's the right word, and meeting with the division deans and lining up faculty. I can't assign faculty as a Gateway director, even though I wish I could. So I really need to work on my relationships and make sure that I'm meeting with my division deans and my academic affairs leadership to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page. Also working with the registrar's office and enrollment services to make sure that that process, that loop gets closed in terms of it going through fiscal, the registrar's office, the academic area, and finally we have a course on the books. I find it's really valuable, particularly with the foundation semester, but as we move into transition semesters, it can be helpful if you have, say, only 7 students that need a course, but you don't want to put them in, Professor I only stand up and talk at students a lot, who's not a really good professor, to kind of work with the college and say, listen, I need a section at this time, and I'd like to open up a shadow CRN, what we call them, a course number, which allows us to put one course on the books with our particular instructor with a certain type of course registration number, and then we can batch register our students into that course and reserve spots. And that is a lot of legwork ahead of time, but it works better in throughout the semester and for the student and the community as a whole, because it sometimes can help out division deans in a pinch because they know they have 5 or 6 students that they may need to put into a class, but it's not enough to run a course. We've actually rescued a couple classes that were going to get canceled by putting Gateway students in it, so they've always appreciated that. So
thank you for explaining
that.
Does
that answer your question, Prentice?
Yeah, and that was really for the benefit of other directors going, okay, what is that and how do I make it happen? And so hopefully with the added detail, folks have a better sense of that particular structure, that particular practice, and can understand how that could actually be a transition strategy. So I appreciate that. Anything to add with regard to lessons learned and processes before we move to how other team members might also support transition students? All right. So, Erik, go ahead.
No, one thing I was going to say that we're actually toying with the idea of continuing with our kind of transition semesters is this idea of an extra academic hour. Basically, it's called Recitation Hour. In some circles, it can be a mandatory tutoring hour. Basically, what we do in our foundation semester is add an extra hour of instruction to every course. And that provides an opportunity for the faculty and the students, because the faculty always know better than any kind of tutor, for the most part, because where the student is. It gives them an extra hour to review key concepts and skills, work with individual students, and we're trying to find a way, both logistically and fiscally, to make that a reality in our continuing semesters, but it can be a challenge when you're dealing with 40 some odd credits that you're purchasing or offering in a given semester. It starts racking up. We pay the professional, the mandated rate from the contract of $25 an hour to our faculty to do that extra hour, and we're trying to investigate ways to make that more of a more common in all of our courses.
Sure.
But it can
that's an awesome idea, Eric, and I'm familiar with that practice being implemented at one of our partner programs. Had an opportunity to talk to the English professor. There were a number of Gateway students in that course where when the regular folks got done with English 101, the Gateway to College students would hang around for that extended instruction for between an additional 30 minutes to upwards of an hour. So I think that definitely you're on to something, and it sounds like that practice is at play at other colleges. Eric, could you speak to the roles and responsibilities that other team members might have who would play a role in supporting transition students?
Yeah, we were, this semester we only have approximately 40 some odd students on campus, as of, middle of November. And so we've been able to really kind of divide the roles really right down the middle in a sense. We have, half of our students are foundation term and the other half are continuing either in their second, third, and in some case fourth semesters with us. And students really identify by cohort, so that can be challenging when you have transition students. We basically call them continuing students because they're never really fully on their own on campus.
Right.
They're really kind of all transitioning. But we just call them all continuing students. And so we have one of our resource specialists primarily responsible for the continuing students and one of our resource specialists primarily responsible for our foundation students. However, we do create avenues and systems for students to be familiar with both resource specialists, so if there is an issue. But, our continuing students, our transitioning students know that, they need to talk to Cheryl if they have an academic issue, or they're going to be, meeting with Cheryl if there is an issue, or even if there isn't an issue. One of the things we also have on staff is a part-time tutor. Fridays are tutoring days, and we mandate that to our foundation students, and in some cases we will mandate it to our continuing students based on their academic standing. And so that can be kind of a carrot that we dangle for students. Is, hey, you're doing pretty well. You don't have to come in on Friday. Hey, you're struggling in English. You got to be here on Friday, and work with Kayla on your English paper. As we grow and expand, it's going to be a challenge, I think, because 30, 40, 50 students in a room, it can get a little hairy. So
yeah, I like the carrot and stick analogy. Students are rewarded for their performance.
Absolutely.
I like that. Awesome. Anything to share in addition to and related to the first 2 points that we're focusing on right now? Either.
I think I've talked quite enough.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your insights. We're going to move on to Dr. Jennifer Alt, Director at Spokane Falls Community College. You want to say hi, Jennifer?
Hello.
Microphone. So that came through a little bit low, so just so you know as we're moving through here. But I'm wondering if you could share with us how your approach to transition is different now than it was during your first semester.
Okay, so am I talking okay now, Prentice?
Oh yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, I just have to lean over the speakerphone very closely.
Okay.
So we're a little different than the other two programs in that we run on quarter system here. And so we actually went through 3 groups of students in the fall, winter, and spring during our first year. And that gave us a lot of chances to adjust. It gave us an extra, one more chance to kind of get it right in the first year as well. And I think one of the biggest things that we learned from our first term and transitioning students is that because we're on quarters, we only have 11 weeks with the students, and we really felt like, oh, well, they started trying pretty hard, and, we'll just move them forward anyways, and we'll put them into 15 units, which is full-time on our campus, which is more than financial aid actually requires. It's just Washington law that it has to be 15 credits.
Oh, wow.
And what we saw was a huge non-successful transition term in our first chance that we tried it. So that was the biggest lesson that we really picked up on, that was not moving kids forward that weren't ready to move forward. And that really has led to us just now really kind of defining a pathways chart, and we're getting that going. Not every kid is going to have a 2.0 and be ready to move forward and go into the full-time course load. And what we're starting to see is our school districts are really on board with the idea of, maybe you saw some success at the end of the quarter, and but they're not quite ready for the full-time piece, or maybe the grades weren't there, or something wasn't there. And like Eric said, it's a financial survival as well. We actually took those kids down on FTE so that they would only take 1 class instead of 3. And we would put them on a contract and put them in there with extra supports and really start to nurture them for another 11 weeks until they could show success in 1 course. And then we would up it to 2 courses and then again get them back up to full-time at the end of that period. We're just starting to kind of see the results of that, and it's successful. And so we're really working on, in our student handbook, not just making it you have a 2.0 or you're out and you can't move forward. We're really going to have a pathways defined to show them what it would take to go the full 15 credits, or what it would take to, what is going to put them into 1 class, what is going to put them into 2. And that was our biggest lesson, I think, that we took away from transition. And
real
going
quick,
forward.
So that first semester, you're looking at students going, hey, the student will be ready for a full load, or no, I think we need to scale it back. They need to take an abbreviated course load. What sort of criteria are you using to make those decisions?
It's a holistic evaluation of the student. I think we talk with the instructors and the resource specialists, and even our office staff weighs in on it, because we, office staff
absolutely.
It's a lot at the front counter with snacks and attitude and behavior, and who's hanging out and doing their homework after school. So it really is looking at the whole student, like the Gateway model says, kind of advises the holistic model. It takes into everything: attitude, behavior, effort, not just their grades. And if we can see a spark towards one area or the other, then we just kind of, and a lot of it's a gut feeling. And we're trying to, that's hard to define on our pathways chart, which is why it's taking us a little bit longer. But it really, it is, I don't want to have one set criteria that says, you have to achieve, 2.0 and that's it.
Right.
It's a holistic evaluation.
Right. That sounds great. Now, along the lines of the holistic element, does the student have an opportunity to weigh in on how he or she is doing?
Yes, we will sit down with that student, and the appropriate parties that want to be there or that need to be there, as far as instructors go, or resource specialists will be there, and we'll kind of make a decision with that student on what the next steps are going to be, and see what they feel about it. Most of the time, while they may want to be ready for more, they understand that they're not quite there, and so it typically isn't much of an argument. And usually they're pretty grateful for being given another chance when they might not have been as successful as they would have liked to.
Mm-hmm. Are there any tools, so we're essentially talking about a process. Are there any other processes or supportive tools that you use to make those decisions that help you determine whether a student transitions?
Goodness. Honestly,
well, so for example, I mean, do you have a rubric that helps support these decisions that you're making, whether a student is, you know, we talked about attitudes, behaviors, instructors, the front desk person. I don't know if there's a checklist with each of those elements on it, or something that you use to approach it that way, or not?
There hasn't been, and that's what we're in the process of developing.
Okay, that sounds great.
So right now it hasn't been like an official kind of thing. We've been doing it without realizing that we're doing it,
Sure.
but now we really want to define it clearly for the students so they understand the expectations as well.
Yeah, and you know, I just want to highlight that point that you just made for the other directors on the line. Make these expectations clear, and whatever the expectations are, stick to it with regard to how you approach making decisions about transition. That way there are no surprises for anyone on the staff, because there can be, you know, one person wants student A to be gone like yesterday, and another person wants student A to have one more chance. So being clear about what those are, and it doesn't hurt to have some sort of structured way to have all those pieces be seen like a rubric or some sort of evaluation form or something like that. Jennifer, is there anything more to be said about the roles and responsibilities of other team members in supporting transition students?
I would say one of the key things that, I mean, we ended up hiring a third resource specialist this fall, that is only dealing with our transition students, because we did notice a lot of the same things you've been hearing, which is that they didn't have the support that they needed, the attention of their resource specialists like they did during foundation term. Because we're taking them in 3 times a year actually, our resource specialists couldn't keep up with the demands that the transition students also had. And so bringing in a third person to focus on transition and run success groups and do all of the things that they really do need has been a really big help this year. We also have, one full-time program assistant and a part-timer as well. And the part-timer's job really has come into play heavily with our students in that she is evaluating their transcripts and she's working on creating their ed plans. And that's assisting our resource specialists so that they're not having to start from scratch with that process.
Wow.
She's dialed into the state requirements, and so it has made the students know they can come to her and ask, what credits do I need to finish, or kind of anything credit-wise that they need to know. And that's been a huge support to the students and the resource specialists.
And what's the cost
and then
for that additional person? What's the cost for that additional person?
About $1,000 a month.
Okay. That's helpful for other folks who are thinking about that.
Yeah, it's a great, she's amazing. So, and then we just moved about a month ago into a new space, which we've been fighting for a year. So I would tell new directors not to give up on that if you don't have your space. We fought hard and we made our presence known. And we now have a huge space for our students to be in where we're all together finally, which we have not had for a year.
Awesome.
Any office space together. And so now we're actually all in the same area, and our students are in the same area, and it's just been phenomenal.
You know what? Now that you mention that, Jennifer, it seems like it's important to call out that other program structures in maybe an indirect way also support transition students, such as it's more difficult to support transition students if you're without an office and your team is scattered about the campus and you don't have that centralized place. So I think that's important, and I know that at least one director on the line right now who is in that predicament right now where the team is waiting on their offices to be finalized. So I'm sure some can definitely understand where you're coming from there. But to call that out as an actual structure that could support transition is something that might not come to mind immediately.
Absolutely. Our president was key in making that happen. There were about 5 other programs vying for space that we wanted, and we were the ones that she selected. So I think really, making our worth known that first year was crucial.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Is there anything else you want to say about supporting transition students at the moment?
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to talk forever, but I didn't, I know Erik and Sounya are awesome with the academics, and I actually wrote down a lot of stuff that they were saying. One of the biggest pieces that we've seen over here on our end is the social piece, and that has not diminished in any point. And actually, it's getting harder as the kids transition, the social emotional. And so one of our biggest resources is our counseling center. There's one counselor in particular that's going to start doing workshops for our students that are really hurting in ways that we can't help them with right now. And so that's been a huge piece of what our supports have needed to be, is that our students are still very broken in many ways, that when they come to us, and 11 weeks doesn't turn that around. And so we really do have to spend a lot of time focusing on things that impact them in their academics because of their home life or because of the challenges they're dealing with. We are starting a support group for drugs and alcohol abuse and staying sober, and we're working on healthy relationship groups and things along those lines, because they just can't move forward with us with those issues in their lives still when they're so distracting. So we do a lot of things to try to help, in that capacity, working with our counseling department. We're also trying to get our transition students out on more field trips and using nature and other non-traditional ways to help them.
Yeah, and the research is out there about groups or students being attached to groups. That increases the likelihood that they stay engaged at the college. But then also it addresses the social and emotional needs that inevitably probably a very extremely high percentage of our students come to us with. So I could clearly see the importance of those approaches. All right, so this is sort of, if anything has come up, you all shared a lot about how you're approaching transition differently now than you had initially, and have called out a wealth of resources and approaches. So for the new directors on the call right now that are thinking about transition, what else might you recommend? And this is sort of not in any particular order, but if there is 1 or 2 things that might have come up that you haven't touched on yet related to this, this would be an opportunity to express that. Any advice?
This is Juan. I have no advice.
So this is the guest directors, and I'm asking them for new directors considering transition for the first time if they have any additional recommendations.
Prentice, I would just say for new directors, just to know what process and expectations you want to outline for students moving forward, and to be very clear on what that process is and who's leading that process and what the expectations are. Oftentimes with a new program, you're working a process as you're going along and developing a program, and you begin to make some changes while you're in the process. And sometimes that tend to not turn out so well, and then at the same time it does. But you want to kind of sit down with your staff and really talk about what do we expect for students who are moving forward and throughout the program, and what are some things we're going to put in place to help students be successful as they continue to transition. I found it's very important to have something consistent for students who are transitioning with the program, whether that's an hour of tutoring, whether it's an hour of a rap session, but something during the week where you still have a touch with those students during a weekly basis, as much as you can, given the demands and the number of students you're enrolling a semester.
Awesome. Thank you much. Any additional?
I would add one thing, is that as hard it is to lose a foundation student, it's that much harder to lose a continuing student, but it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Don't fall victim to the, they made it through their first semester, they're just gonna be fine. You're gonna lose some students, and it's gonna be hard, and just be ready for it. Not to leave it on a bad note, they're all gonna do great, but you know.
Of course they are. But this is just based on the off chance that something goes haywire. We want to be prepared.
Yeah.
Jennifer, any thoughts?
You know, I think something that I actually loved hearing from Erik last time when I was on this phone call a year ago. So he's right about the advice he just shared. But I think I would add just making sure that you're, it's hard because you're so focused on helping the students, but the other flip side of it to make your life easier is going to be getting out into your campus and community and your school districts and making sure that they are constantly aware of your needs, of what you're doing, because we've realized over here on our end it has paid off big time this year for us.
Give me an example of one way that that's paid off for you.
Aside from getting new space.
Yeah, well, that's huge. I guess we could stop there. Call's over.
We just actually last week, Prentice, we just had a visit because one of our school districts is so great and in supportive of us. They sent over a state senator, the superintendent, and the newly elected school board director from that district to come and talk to our students. And so in the hopes that they're going to, the state senator is going to help us as far as getting lunches for our students and bus passes for them.
Awesome.
Wow.
That is
awesome.
great.
Can I have your district?
Can I come to you?
I love them. I'm never sharing them with anybody.
We'll have competitions for district partners on our next webinar. All right, so we wanted to highlight some tools that we have available, and I'm going to have Galen just perhaps talk us through one or two, and you can essentially just tell me where to go once this page opens up.
So as Prentice is pulling up, okay, great, our page is there. I want to talk or just mention another resource that is on GatewayLive, and it's one of the chapters in the Student Selection Support Manual, preparing students for transitions into Gateway continuation. And so just know that that is in the Student Support Manual, and there's some good information there. So you'll want to check that out also. For this particular page, if you're taking notes, you might want to write this particular page down because the name of it is going to be important for finding it. And you'll notice here on the Student Support Strategy, Foundation, Transition, and Ongoing Terms that there are a lot of tablets or tables or tabs that you can access in order to get some information. And I just want to give a shout out to Chris and Prentice for spending a great amount of time in pulling these resources together and compiling them. And they are some really good things that are well worth exploring. So you'll notice at the top that the tabs are going to guide your search. So let's begin by looking at the Transition and Ongoing Terms tab. You'll see on that particular page that the way it's structured is you have student support strategies, you have the frequency of use, you have who would be using it, when they would use it, and then you have the section for the specific tool. What I'd like to highlight on this particular page are the strategies under program structure. So if we can go down to program structures.
Sure.
All right, there we go. So under program structures, you see the heading there, team leaders. And they talk about there that term. I didn't want anyone to be, questioning what that is exactly. Oh, I love that highlighter. But it is, when we talk about the term here, team leaders, it is in essence just a resource specialist. And that terminology of having that resource specialist that is dedicated and focusing specifically on some of the needs of the transition students. And so I just wanted to highlight that really, I think that's really the basis or the foundation for the strategy for transition students, is really having someone there that's going to continue to provide that holistic student support. And I think it was stated earlier that we know that students need this, and we want to make sure that that we're continuing to provide that high touch, that high support for students as they're in their transition phase. So that's the first strategy that I'd like to highlight. The other strategy that I'd like for us to look at is under the readiness and assessment tool. And you'll notice here that there is the student accountability rubric. And that particular tool is very handy for really helping students note and think about where they are around academic behavior. And so as you think about how are students doing around their attendance and turning in their work, those kinds of things. So the student accountability rubric highlights that for students. And I'm glad to see Princess is pulling that up now. So it has students to think about how are they doing in these particular areas. And these are the kinds of behaviors that students need to pay attention to that support them in accomplishing the academic tasks in their coursework. So these areas are very important. And again, I think it's well worth having a tool like this to really help students and those who are working with them to be really clear about where the student is around these areas and what places they need to develop in order to experience greater success. Lastly, I'd like for us to talk about the extended implementation plan. And this is not actually on the Gateway page in relation to transition strategies, but it is in your, it's now been loaded into your database. And so in the extended implementation plan, there's a lot of information here. And there's probably far more than what you would need to use all at one time. But I think there's some things here that are really well worth taking a look at as you're doing your planning for transition and thinking through some of those areas. So for example, under holistic student support, there's an area that just talks about how are you going to be supporting students in transition. What specific things are you going to be doing in order to get maintain that high touch?
And and I'll just call out real quick the difference between the extended implementation plan and the regular program implementation plan is that the regular program implementation plan is an absolute must-do. The extended implementation plan is optional, but strongly suggested that you review some of these things because the extended implementation plan was developed with the thought in mind that what are the things that you need to be tending to that maybe you haven't thought about? And so that was really the frame of reference that this the extended implementation plan was developed, and you can access this through your database. And there is I won't find it right now, there's a lot of stuff in here, but one of the things in here has to do with developing a student transition plan, for example. Oh, here it is right here. Develop a transition student support plan, including a readiness assessment, and identify how students will be supported and how often staff will meet with them, et cetera, post-foundation. And actually, as that's described, I heard a lot of examples from our guest directors relating to each of those points. So
I think that's well said, Prentice. And you'll notice also, as you look at that extended plan, that some of those things might be things that you might have initially looked at during your regular implementation plan, but maybe you haven't thought about them lately. And so it just brings to surface some things that might have gotten pushed back, you know, in your thinking or in your planning. And so it just brings all of that back to the surface as you're getting prepared to serve the students that are in that transition phase.
all right, thank you, Galen. And we will work our way back to the show. Okay, so now is a time for our new directors to pose questions to our guest directors. Juan, I want to take you first. It sounded like you were queued up and ready to go with a question. So what question do you have for our guest directors? We'll start with Juan first.
I've got thousands of questions.
Okay, so could you narrow that down to one?
Sure, absolutely. Okay. I think that right now in our transition, I think what we're preparing for is some students who will be moving forward into the college model here at Donley. And then we have some students who are going to be hybrid. So they'll move partially in some of their courses, and they'll remain back in some of the foundation courses, but we're looking at a preparatory piece with the college. And the third group we have is basically students who are not moving forward and would have to, again, do the 16 weeks over again. And I guess really that's kind of where we're at right now. We're, as a matter of fact, this week meeting with our students to let them know that. And that last group is a smaller group. It's a group of 10 students who are here every day, not behavioral problems, but not motivated. And we feel like we've put a lot behind them to try to get them motivated and engaged in the process, but are just not doing it. So our partner, the school district, we are going to go back to them and say, what would you like us to do here? You know, and so I guess my question in all that is that how everybody else is set up? Is that how we're doing it? Are we doing it correctly? And what do we do with those students that just aren't moving forward? We have those 10 students who just are here every day, like I said, are not behavioral problems. They're good young people, but unfortunately and I feel like we've done a lot of things, we can't move them forward. And so they're going to possibly repeat this again. Is that what everybody else does? Have them go through another 16 weeks?
So Juan, thanks for the question. And rather than open, so this is not misconstrued as everybody on the call, I want to just keep this focused on our guest panelists for right now, just due to time. So Sounya, Erik, or Jennifer, what are your thoughts in response to Juan's question?
I would say that, Juan, you are dealing with a problem that we all deal with, so don't think you're the only one. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges as a Gateway director and as a Gateway staff we deal with, is what do we do with students that, you know, good kids, but they're just not cutting it, because there aren't a lot of options out there, and, you know, the hardcore part of me wants to say, well, just get rid of them, you know, to say, hey, listen, this isn't working for you, we have to find you another option. But you also have to be, you know, as a new program, you have to look at your retention numbers. And so it really becomes kind of a wagging the dog, cat, you know, chasing the tail kind of thing, you know, what direction you go in. And I think the best thing to do is to work with the district, try and work with the student and any support structure he has, be it family or friends, and say, hey, listen, this isn't working. And we need to find something that can work for you. And I think that's where, as a director, going out and finding different partnerships with a youth build, with a GED program, with the school district or alternative high school within the district, or credit recovery, that can become a carrot you can use to, hey, listen, it's not working right now. Because that's what I tell my students. I never say, I'm kicking you out of Gateway. I say, this isn't working right now. We need to find you something that can work for you. And so we try and use, say, the credit recovery option, or say, go back to the high school, and if you want to come back, get some credit so we can try and have this conversation again in the future. But it's having those release valves for those students that just aren't cutting it. And it's the hardest thing in the world. I hope that helped.
And I would just like to say I concur with what Erik is.
Oh, please, go ahead, Sounya.
No, thank you. I was going to say I agree with Erik that that's the most difficult part in being able to make those decisions. But what I found was that if we have to be honest with students and letting them know where they are in the program and what it takes to continue and complete a program like Gateway, which is very different than most alternative programs. And having that honest conversation with them and their parents or guardians to say, given what your situation and where you are, if you continue on with this type of behavior, or the motivation, if it doesn't increase, it can become a challenge for the students, because once they begin to take college courses, they are building a permanent record for themselves. And for some students who are not doing well academically, you don't want them to continue down that road knowing that if they did disenroll or for some other reason leave Gateway, they come back with getting their high school diploma, and they come back and have a hard time getting into that community college within their city. You want them to be able to leave with a record that they can come back to and not have a challenge in getting enrolled into college. But counseling and talking with the student up front early on is very important. So you're doing the things that we would do.
Great advice, Sounya. And I think in addition to what Erik and Sounya has shared, because Sounya, you mentioned something about making sure whatever the expectations are, that they're clear with the student and the student supporters and family members. A similar conversation from a different angle has to happen with the school district partners too, so that they are aware of how the program intends to support its own expectations and carry those out. Being clear about the program's expectations helps the district partner to shape their expectations of what the program can and can't do. When that's fuzzy, the district partner's expectation of the program is fuzzy, and then that's when you can potentially run into some differences of approaches. And so it's true, getting clear about what the processes are with the student and their supporters, but also for your school district partners too, so that you're not being asked to do something that you feel uncomfortable doing.
And real quick before Jennifer jumps in, Juan, I just want to ask one more quick clarifying question. So in essence, these are good students, they have good attendance, but academically they're not cutting it.
So I would even divide the group into, say, the first scenario is true and the second scenario is true. Yes, so we do have students who are here, but academically they're not cutting it. And then the second group is like you mentioned it. I mean, they're here, but they're just not motivated.
Wow. So what does that not motivated look like? I'm just trying to understand what that means.
It's completion of work. So, they've got to turn in papers, write journals. They're just not turning in. And that's probably 3 or 4 students who we have who they're here every day. We even say, hey, how are you doing? We're talking to them. We're asking them questions about their workload. And they're like, yeah, we're on it. And then, you know, we find out through 16 weeks they've not been doing any of it, even though we've been checking in with them, pulling them in, talking to them, looking at their test scores, getting them and providing them tutoring, but they don't do their work.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds
Sometimes
like
it's better to let them go.
yeah, and it sounds like you said after 16 weeks you found out that they aren't getting the work done. I think, you know, as we're doing these check-ins earlier on in the student's time in the program, I think it's important to have a clearer sense of where the student actually is, so that at week 3 you know whether they're off the rails or not.
Yeah, and so as I've looked at the rubrics that have been provided, that's something that we did not use. I mean, again, this is the first time, you know, we're new, but we will definitely do the 2, 4, 6, 10-week rubrics with these students, and then do self-rubrics. And I think that that will change some of that. But I'm thinking about these students in transition more so right now.
Right.
What do we do?
Yeah. Thank you, Juan. And you know, we got to keep it moving. Great questions. Jennifer, I wanted to provide you the opportunity to chime in if you had anything to add, and then we'll move to Chris, and then we'll see if there's other questions.
I would echo Erik and Sounya. The other thing I think I would add is that we have a relationship with our Adult Basic Ed and GED program in our district. So when we do have to let them go, we try to get them set up there, and if they are wanting to try to work their way back into Gateway, we leave that door open and we set a certain type of project. We have different projects for different kids that, depending on where their deficits were, and we leave that door open for them to earn their way back in, for the ones who are just devastated by the loss of being let go. So that's one of the things there. But I would also add, again, we're on 11-week terms instead of 16. But one of the things that we did that has been a huge help is really scaffolding the work and foundation as far as how many points it's worth. The first 3 weeks of our quarter, homework-wise and essay-wise and everything, are not worth as much as the second 3 weeks, which are not worth as many points as the third 3 weeks. And what that's done is it allows students who finally, the light bulb comes on at the end, even though they haven't been doing anything all quarter, it still gives them the chance to, you know, get it and pass the course and start to show pre-improvement when they, you know, so they're not too deep in a hole that they can't dig out of when the light bulb finally does go on.
Yeah, I like that, because it allows the student to develop the necessary habits of mind so that they are not penalized and essentially sink themselves within the first 2 weeks of the semester.
Exactly.
Chris, you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, and actually Jennifer, you know, gave a good lead into what I was going to add, and in regards to the stop-out experience of Gateway students. And what she's described is, I think, is a process that as students do leave of their own choice or of your decision-making, giving them a plan by which, if they express the interest, they can come back. And what we have in terms of from the National Network are some data on a study that was done of what's termed stop-out students. And of those students who do come back, we can report that they graduate at basically the same rates as students who didn't ever stop out. So I would hope that that's encouraging. You know, each one of the cases are individual, but I encourage programs to develop, you know, the options so that students can have the opportunity to come back. And of course, that requires working out with district partners as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Questions from other directors, other new directors? Either there really are no questions and our panelists have been extremely thorough, which is very likely, or this has been a really long call and you're just ready for this to be over. All right, if there are no more questions, we will not force that issue. A few other things. I just thought that I would leave the opportunity open for any final thoughts, final tips or advice from our panelists. If there are none, I appreciate that too.
I would just say do the best you can in helping the student succeed. And that means if you find, if Gateway is not the best fit, then find a fit that works for that student.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, believe it or not, you're doing enough. Don't forget that. You can lose sight of that very easily.
Right. That's a good point, Eric. Thank you.
Find another director that you can have a good conversation with at least a couple times a quarter.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. And so if our directors are interested in following up with either of you based on something you said today, is it okay if they contact you with questions related to this? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
Hey, it's Kemma. I did have a question, but I was having issues with my technology here. I guess I'm trying to figure out how to support the resource specialists who are dealing with the new cohort coming in and the transitioning students, how to help them find balance. And that's what I was kind of hoping to hear, but I didn't really hear that in the presentation. So
sure. And this will be our last question because we're about 3 minutes away, but panelists, what are your thoughts with regard to Kemma's question?
I would just say in turn. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
No, Sonia, I always talk first. You go ahead.
Ladies first.
Say, if I can recall, I know the Gateway National Network had some great strategies in terms of some sessions of having the resource specialists really kind of outline their roles in terms of their leadership task, and then trying to identify who would be the leader in each of those paths, similar to what we saw today in terms of some of those strategies. Given that we only have our 2 resource specialists, we did just that. We outlined the strengths of each other in terms of what we were good at, and then we just went from there. You might have one who's able to be the talkative person to go out in the community and do some things, and you have another one who is more so not so talkative. So you just got to balance your strengths in terms of your resource specialist and identify how to help that resource specialist balance maintaining, their workload on top of their leadership tasks.
And I'd like to add to that, because on the that transition page that we looked at, there is a tool called the Protocol for Resource Specialist Meetings, and it's an organizational tool that I think could help Kemma resource specialists help in organizing their meetings and their times with their foundation students as well as their transition students. So that might be a tool that you could find helpful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And real quick, I just wanted to clarify, Kevin, when you said support for resource specialists, are you meaning strategies and structures for helping them deal with transition students, or are you saying social, emotional support?
Oh, Lord. If I was there, I'd be in trouble, right? But although who knows, I could be there and just don't know it yet. But no, it's really more of helping them balance between the needs, between what will become a growing population in their transitioning students, and then their ever-present, foundation cohort.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And some of those group meetings that we heard as some of the strategies, oftentimes those are carried out by resource specialists with a group of transition students on a regular basis that might talk about challenges, successes, and that way there's a regular engagement with students who've transitioned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, so what's next? We'll post this webinar on GatewayLive. I'll send out a link to you all and for your use if you want to review the audio after the fact and zero back to some of the strategies that were talked about on the call today. Your feedback matters, and so we'll email you a link to a brief evaluation on SurveyMonkey and learn about what worked for you and what didn't, and we'll use that information to improve these offerings. And your student support liaison will follow up with you during the first week of December to discuss your transition plan. So this call should have prompted some thoughts about ways to begin approaching that question of transition, even though I know a number have already began to take steps in that direction. And stay tuned. After the first of the year, for all round 10 directors, we're going to have an end of semester reflection call. And that really is going to be asking for your thoughts and reflections on how the first semester went, as there's a lot of work that goes into implementing a Gateway to College program and then actually pulling it off. And so we want to set aside the time to thank you for that, and then also to hear your successes as well as concerns. So be on the lookout for that. And I'll just say, thank you for your time and engagement today. Great questions and great advice from our experienced directors, and wishing you a great week. So thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.